Somewhere beneath the scorched desert floor of northern Egypt, a fragment of bone had been waiting for 18 million years. Not in a famous valley, not where anyone expected, and when a young scientist finally knelt down and brushed the dust away, what she held in her hand didn't just belong to a new species. It threatened to undo everything we thought we knew about where we came from. If you've ever looked in the mirror and wondered where we truly come from, this discovery is for you. And if you're new here, we cover the most extraordinary true stories science has to offer. Hit subscribe, drop a like, and let's go back 18 million years. Picture northern Egypt, not the Egypt of pyramids and pharaohs. Much older, much stranger. This is the Wadi Moghra, a dry, wind-carved valley that stretches across the Egyptian desert like a scar across ancient skin. Today it is barren, bleached, almost lifeless. But 18 million years ago, this land was alive in ways that would shock you. Subtropical forests, dense canopies, rivers threading through a landscape teeming with creatures that no longer exist. For over a century, paleontologists had combed this fossil site and found ancient monkeys, prehistoric fish, fossilized crocodiles. Important finds, but not the one that truly mattered, because nobody had ever found an ape here. Not once. The scientific world had long accepted a simple story. Modern apes, the evolutionary family that includes chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, gibbons, and yes, us, originated in East Africa. That's where the fossils were. That's where the evidence pointed. East Africa was the answer. But answers have a quiet way of becoming assumptions. And assumptions have a quiet way of becoming blind spots. Enter Hesham Salam. Professor Salam leads the Mansoura University Vertebrate Paleontology Center, the same team that made international headlines in 2018 with the discovery of a new dinosaur species in Egypt. He is a man who has built his career on finding what others missed. And for 5 years, he had a feeling that something extraordinary was hiding in the northern African fossil record. When we look closely at the early ape family tree, he would later say, it becomes clear that something is missing, and North Africa holds that missing piece. 5 years of searching, 5 years of expeditions into the desert, 5 years of almost. Then came 2024. It was researcher EurekAlert who found it first. She was walking the ancient terrain of Wadi Moghra during a field expedition, eyes trained on the ground, as paleontologists do, when something stopped her. A fragment, partially exposed, partially buried, small enough to miss, significant enough to change history. It was a piece of a lower jaw, with a tooth still attached. Alashkar later recalled that she knew immediately. Ape teeth are different from monkey teeth. They're flatter, more squared, with distinctive proportions between the molars. She had studied enough fossils to recognize the difference in seconds. I immediately realized that it was an ape, she said. The team carefully extracted the specimen. Then, in a detail that reads almost like fate, a second jaw fragment surfaced. One that had actually been found earlier in the lab's collection, forgotten, unidentified. A photograph had preserved it. Alashkar recognized it as part of the same ancient animal, a different individual, the same species. Together, the two fragments began to tell a story. The jaw was robust, unusually powerful. The canine and premolar teeth were exceptionally large, built for force, for grip, for survival. The molars had rounded, heavily textured, chewing surfaces with thick enamel, the kind of teeth adapted for cracking hard fruits, nuts, and seeds when softer food ran scarce. This was not a delicate creature. This was an ape built for a world that demanded versatility. The team named it Masripithecus moghraensis, combining Masr, the Arabic word for Egypt, with the Greek pithekos, meaning ape, the Egyptian ape of Moghra. It was unlike anything ever found from this time period, and it was 18 million years old. Here is where the story gets strange. For decades, the scientific consensus held that early apes during the early Miocene, roughly 14 to 23 million years ago, were confined to East and Central Africa. The fossil evidence supported it. Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, that's where the ancient ape record lived. North Africa, during this same period, It had monkeys, plenty of them, but no apes. The assumption became that apes simply weren't there, that they hadn't spread that far north yet. Masripithecus shattered that assumption in one afternoon. Not only was this an ape in North Africa, it was an ape more closely related to modern apes than anything found in East Africa from the same time period. Let that land for a moment. Every major early ape fossil recovered from East Africa during the early Miocene sits further from our evolutionary lineage than this jaw fragment from the Egyptian desert, which forces a profoundly uncomfortable question. If the ancestor of all modern apes was supposed to be in East Africa, then why does the closest known relative appear here, in the north, in a place scientists weren't even looking? The research team didn't speculate loosely. They built their case with precision. Using a sophisticated method called Bayesian tip dating, they combined anatomical measurements from the fossil itself with genetic data from living apes and age data from dozens of other fossil species. The goal? Reconstruct the ape family tree with the highest possible accuracy and determine where Masripithecus sits within it. The result was striking. Masripithecus moghraensis emerged as a stem hominoid, an early member of the broader ape lineage, positioned closer to the last common ancestor of all living apes than any early Miocene species previously known from East Africa. This opened the door to several competing interpretations. Theory 1. The Northern Origin Hypothesis. This is the most provocative reading of the evidence. The researchers' biogeographic analysis suggests that the common ancestor of all modern apes most likely lived in northern Afro-Arabia, the Levant, or the eastern Mediterranean region. Under this theory, apes did not originate in East Africa at all. Instead, they arose in the north, and some populations later migrated southward into the East African environments where the bulk of our fossil record happens to come from. The strength of this theory is that it is directly supported by the phylogenetic analysis. Its weakness: it rests on a single jaw from a single site in a fossil record full of gaps. Theory 2. The sampling bias explanation. Some experts, including paleontologist Suzanne Coe of the University of Calgary, offer a more cautious interpretation. They argue that apes may have been geographically widespread across Africa all along, including in northern regions, but that the fossil record is deeply uneven. East Africa happens to have been intensively excavated for over a century. North Africa, the Levant, the Arabian Peninsula, these regions remain vastly underexplored. Under this theory, the absence of northern African ape fossils before now reflects where scientists dug, not where apes actually lived. The discovery of Masripithecus doesn't rewrite the origin story. It fills in a map that was always incomplete. Theory 3. The crossroads model. A third possibility sits between the two. During the early Miocene, the African and Arabian tectonic plates were completing their final collision with Asia, a geological event that reshaped migration corridors between Africa and Eurasia. Northern Africa and the Middle East sat directly at the center of this crossroads. Under this model, Masripithecus represents not the origin point of all apes, but a crucial transitional population living at the geographic gateway between continents, a waypoint on an evolutionary journey that would eventually carry apes into Europe and Asia. In a related perspective piece published alongside the study in Science, researchers David Alba and Julia Arias-Martorell wrote that the findings confirm that paleontologists might have been looking for crown hominoid ancestors in the wrong place. That is not a casual statement. That is an invitation to rethink an entire field. Step back for a moment and consider what this means, not just for paleontology, but for the human story itself. For generations, the narrative of human origins has been told as an East African story. The Great Rift Valley, the Olduvai Gorge, the cradle of mankind. These places are real, and their importance is undeniable. But science is not a finished monument. It is a living investigation. What Masripithecus quietly suggests is that the evolutionary forces that eventually produced every living ape, including human beings, may have been in motion across a far wider geographic stage than we imagined. Northern Africa, the Levant, the ancient shores of a Mediterranean that looked nothing like it does today. It also forces a deeper methodological reckoning. How much of what we know about our origins is actually a reflection of where funding went, where expeditions were mounted, which regions received scientific attention? The fossil record is not a perfect archive. It is a mosaic of what survived, what was found, and what was looked for. Masripithecus is a reminder that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. 18 million years ago, an ape moved through the forests of what is now a desert. It cracked open hard seeds with jaws built for resilience. It navigated a world in transformation, shifting seasons, changing landscapes, tectonic forces slowly redrawing the map of continents. It had no idea, of course, what it was. No awareness that the lineage it belonged to would one day produce creatures that would name it, study it, argue about it. And yet here we are. A young paleontologist kneels in the Egyptian sand. She lifts a fragment of ancient bone, and in that single moment, 18 million years collapse into nothing. We are still trying to understand where we came from. We are still, in the most profound sense, searching. And every so often, the Earth gives us a fragment, incomplete, imperfect, maddeningly small, and whispers, "You were looking in the wrong place." What else are we missing? And that is the question I want to leave with you. If a single jaw fragment from an overlooked desert valley can challenge decades of scientific consensus, what other discoveries are still buried, still waiting, in the places nobody thought to look? Drop your theory in the comments. Do you think modern apes originated in North Africa? Or do you believe this is simply a gap in the fossil record finally being filled? I genuinely want to know what you think. If this story moved you the way it moved me, give it a like, share it with someone who loves science, and subscribe. We cover true stories exactly like this one. Discoveries that don't just make headlines, but quietly rewrite history. See you in the next one.